All right, it was wonderful. Now here's the scripture. Jesus is talking about what it means and how it shall be that we follow him, or if we do follow him. So listen closely, because I'm sure you might be a little offended. Imagine that. Now large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and Jesus turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and it's not able to finish, all who see it begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build and was not able to finish.' Or what king going out to wage war against another king will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So therefore, none of you can become my disciple if you do not give up all your possessions." All righty. You can't become his disciple. How's that sound? Hard. You cannot become his disciple unless what? Possessions. Give them up. What else, Janie? Unless he says at the very end, unless you give up your possessions. Okay, so that's sort of like a summing up at the very end of everything else that he said before, with different kinds of analogies that he was making in regards to how and when you can become a disciple and what it's going to take. You cannot keep your possessions. Okay, so you heard the first part of the scripture. You've heard the summing up of it all. Okay, now tell me, do you have an interpretation of that last phrase? You cannot keep your possessions if you want to become his disciple? Do you have any kind of an interpretation of that? You've been a Christian your whole life, most of you. Okay? Thank you.
I think idols. Give up the idols.
So Jenny says she thinks if I give up my idols. Okay, when you say your idols, what do you, in general, what do you think? Can you expound on the word idols? Giving up the physical may be something they're worshiping. Okay? I want to hold on that for a second. All right? Let's focus on that because that's a great point. What else can an idol be?
Money.
I'm sorry? Money? What were you saying, James? Loved ones. Well, yeah. You know? An idol not only is some physical thing, right, that we might pray to, that we put up there because you look at our church. Let's put it this way. Look at your church. Do you see, it's pretty plain, isn't it? That's not a coincidence, my friends. The Congregational church, the Protestant church in general, it's not a coincidence that it's sort of plain. You know, there was a thing called the Reformation. And there was a reaction at that time against the church. And when we say the church, there was only one church at that time as far as Christianity was concerned. Well, other than maybe the West and the East. But the Western church had all kinds of statues lining the walls of the churches. It was very ornate. And you'd see different saints, or you'd see the stations to the cross, okay? There are prayer stations that you would go to, okay? And my gosh, now Jesus, of course, had no understanding of that, but we as well-matured, seasoned into the 15th century Christians did. By then, there were all these things, and so at least for the Protestant reformers, there was a sense that these things were idols. We were praying to them rather than praying to God. So quite literally at points, there are times, okay, during this time, people were going into the church and they were ripping these things down off the walls, okay? They were tearing them so that the walls so it was bare. So this is a physical representation of that interpretation of this whole thing. Now, let's get our minds now off of a physical representation and let's talk now about other things can be an idol. Now, Dudley said money can be an idol, all right? And James said loved ones can be an idol, because didn't we see that in here? Mother and father, sister and brother, loved ones, right? He must be talking about them as possessions. What other things you might see as an idol? Anything else? Yeah, maybe a leader is an idol. What did you have to say, Cheryl? Celebrities, yes. American Idol, right? Yes. Football. Football. It's Sunday. Yes. All right. So when I think Jesus, or the interpreter of this particular English scripture, wrote down here, possessions. It's the things that we possess. Now, they don't have to be possessed as if we take them and we can put them in a safe deposit box, or we can put them into a bank account, okay, that we possess them, or we put them in our home, or we claim, this belongs to us, or we as a nation say, well, this belongs to us, or a territory belongs to us. Not that kind of possession, but the possession that we have in our hearts. No, this is mine. This is something I must have, or something I must focus on, or something that I must hold on to and must exist in my life. And if it's not there, my life has been fractured. Okay? That's an idol. That's a possession. Okay? All right, so dare I ask this question, knowing that, and it's okay, we all have idols. What would one of your idols be? I know right now, a week into it, I have an idol in my son, who's away at school, and we worry so much about. What idols might you have? Come on, give yourself up. What's that? Your Tesla. Yes. You can give it up to the church. How's that? Yeah. Jennifer says, financial security. Yeah. That's okay. We have our idols. We draw our own personal lines in the sand and say, I'll go so far, but I will not go past that line. Okay? So I think you get the idea, because it might be a little frightening. Cheryl, your coffee! I have mine as well. Yes. Sorry, that was an ad for Cumbies there on the video. So Jesus is saying, if you hold on to these things, you can't be my disciple. Now, you're holding on to things right now. Is it not, are you not a disciple? Let me ask you that. Because of this statement, because you're holding on to things, because there are certain idols in your life, are you a disciple? Is there a difference between a follower and a disciple? A very good question, sir. What do you all think? What do you think? Okay, so in certain cases, he believes that it is so. Mm-hmm.
Some people refer to them as disciples, but traditionally the disciples are unidentified. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, traditionally we see there's a certain small group, right? That they're the close ones. Now, I imagine we could survive on that. We could draw that distinction and otherwise call ourselves a follower, maybe. But I think Jesus really wants all of us to become disciples. Honestly. I mean, that's his desire. Okay? Because any leader, especially in that time, had disciples. They were able to offer their influence to the world by having followers that were close, that adhered to things. Okay? So, any other thoughts about that? I had one person say there might be a difference between a disciple and a follower, but can you be a disciple if you keep your idols, your possessions? You think so? Okay. Jeff?
I don't think that Jesus intended you to starve or to be unhoused or to be unclothed in your discipleship. So you can have what you need.
So Jeff suggests Jesus knew that you needed to be fed, housed, clothed. You needed those things. So you know. It was interesting. It was suggested that, you know, there might be a difference between a disciple and a follower. Now, I think that is pointing up how much of a follower are you? You know, and that always is something that is always in our hearts. How much am I going to follow Jesus? How much am I going to be an evangelical representation of Jesus as well, right? Am I going to bring up God, or am I going to bring up Jesus in my discussion with somebody? Okay, in my daily life? That's one of the lines that we draw, or a degree of how much of a follower, how much of a disciple we're going to be, right? There's also then this, you know, I want to just get strictly back to the scripture because I could go down that line forever. Now, Jesus, he really hits us upside the head, though. He says, whoever comes to me and does not, he really uses a pretty strong word. Hate. Father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even life itself. What do you think that word? Yes, Paula.
My idea of Jesus is that he would never say anything like that. That's somebody else that wrote that in the Bible.
Very good. Paula says somebody probably introduced that word hate. You know, I would, because she heard Jesus, she doesn't think he would ever say such a thing. I think that's a fair thing to say. You know, you can say that. You're allowed to say that. Look, she just did it, right? Okay? You know, because sometimes, what can we make of this? The scripture? What can we make of it? What are we just talking about? An idol? Sometimes we can even make scripture an idol. This is not Jesus. These words are not Jesus, right? Think about that. Now, I don't want to give you all kinds of ways to wriggle out of this, though. Honestly, you know, some people will say, well, then Ken said you don't have to follow Jesus or whatever, right? Exactly. That's what Paula thinks, and that's not what I would mean. There is a... yes, ma'am, Ann.
I just wanted to add that, this giving up all your possessions, that was probably in the late 1940s or 50s. There was something called the Oxford Movement, and it then evolved into moral rearmament for America. And the idea was that if you joined the moral rearmament movement, you gave up all your possessions, your house, your money, for the movement. And
Yes.
every morning they get together to listen to the guidance of God.
So Anne is pointing up that there have been societies based in an understanding of a faith that does enforce upon its adherents to actually give up all of their possessions. Okay? Mighty convenient for the leader, right? Mighty convenient. And that happens, it's happening all the time. There's some very big operations in this world that are doing it that way. I understand this, and I love what Paula had to say. She has that maturity of understanding to realize that Maybe it wasn't specifically that hatred, that a hate word that was being used, but rather I think Jesus was trying to express to us that there is a line. Now, there is a line between following Jesus and holding fast to something that's going to keep us from following Jesus. We have our blood relatives, right? Not even blood. Gabe's not my blood. He's adopted. But he is my blood, right? He is my absolute. But we have these allegiances to those people or to our spouse or whatever. And it is that very thing that Jesus is actually taking into account and question. Will you choose, if it comes down to it, will in your spouse or your church or your country or whatever, if they are espousing something, wanting to go in a certain direction, are doing something which is in opposition to your understanding what Jesus has taught you, what are you going to do? Ministers have this problem all the time. Again, I keep bringing it up. Ministers and rabbis all the time get beaten up for saying something in the pulpit that seems against the nation. You see, that's the possession sometimes that we have to come to understanding. Which is it? What am I going to give my allegiance? That is what it is. Who am I? Jesus is saying, what's your allegiance going to be? When it comes down to it. Because that is the defining factor. Now, I can't decide that for you. I'm not going to sit down, I'm not going to write down a treatise and with everything that happens in the world and all of the political stuff and all the things that happen in town and demand that you come and confess what's happening in your family, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to say, okay, this is what you have, the choices that you have to make in order to be a faithful follower. I'm not going to do that. You've never seen me do that. I've never done that from the pulpit. I have, though, spoken about the choices that we have to make. And understanding it, saying to one another and saying to you as a follower, you have a choice. I know what Jesus is saying, and again, I just caught myself. I said, hold on, am I saying that if I say something, you have to follow what I say? And, I had to catch myself there. But that is the relationship we have with Jesus. It comes down, am I going to have that hard discussion with myself? Have I had that hard discussion with myself? And that is what he's saying. What am I possessing that is possessed so greatly that I will do something contrary to Jesus' teaching as I understand it? It's going to happen in our lives. It has happened in our lives. Often. Okay? Doesn't mean Jesus is going to cut you off. It doesn't mean Jesus says you're going to hell. It doesn't mean Jesus is suggesting that your church excommunicate you. It is a moment of reflection that Jesus is wanting us to have. Am I following him in God's teaching? Or have I chosen in a certain situation to align myself with something else? Okay, it's up to you now. It really is. It always has been. But with this teaching, it tells you that there's a line, and it has been drawn in your life. And I pray for an understanding, though, of serenity for you. That you come to understand who you are and what it is that you follow and what you find most important in your heart. And you're going to have to understand, it may not be the same as the person next to you. That's what comes up with our differences. So I pray that you each day and with each thought, you find a serenity where you're praying for the kind of leadership to follow, and that you do so with heart, with humility, and with courage. My friends, I pray that this be your gift in all times. May the Lord be with you.